Winfield Scott was a very respected and knowledgeable man when it came to preparing and planning a war and its strategies. He was a very successful and self-driven man, being in the military for a total of 53 years and 47 were during three major war times. Winfield Scott was no man to mess with. He took the Army and made it a team, an organized, unstoppable force. I would say Winfield Scott is the reason our military and its ways are still that way today. Back when Winfield Scott joined the Army, there was no organization. All it was a group of men trying to figure out how to survive and win the war. In time, it was advancing and becoming more centralized and strategically planned. But what they didn't have was unity. Winfield Scott wrote the first set of standards for military discipline and appearance. This is where it all began. Not only were you in the Army, but now you stood for something. You meant something other than just someone who ran off to the Army to fight and try to make a country. You represented your country. Today, this is how this is how we are and what we are in today's military. Like an old division officer of mine used to tell me, "Petty officer, we could give us Afghanistan or Iraq, any country, everything we have in our military, and they still wouldn't be able to do what we do. We're educated, trained, and proficient at what we do. Tell me another country that could take these 75 jets sitting on our flight deck of this carrier, launch them in 45 minutes, recover 25 of them, and do it 3 times a day." That quote drove me when I was still in the military to strive for the best and doing everything to the best of my ability, never settling for the best. Once you think you were the best, you just fell behind. This is what I believe Winfield Scott started back then and is still going today, unnoticed by this generation who started this caused the United States to have the strongest, most powerful military in the world. Winfield Scott's strategies were on point and worked extremely well. General Scott's Anaconda Plan was not only genius, but it saved lives and worked out perfectly. Other commanders such as Ulysses S. Grant, Andrew Fote, David Dixon Porter, and David Farragut respected General Scott and were like-minded when it came to the Anaconda Plan. After Vicksburg's fall on July 4, 1863, the Anaconda constricted the Confederates' trade, causing supplies to stockpile and went unused. Massive problems with their currency and its values dropped dramatically, and eventually the Confederate States were forced to fight, but there is one other major problem. How does a starving army fight? They can't. They're weak. They don't have food because of the Anaconda Plan. This is great work of Winfield Scott and his commanders with their sharp and precise execution. In today's time, we do the same thing, just a lot more technologically advanced. If Marines are under fire in the mountains in Afghanistan, they can back off, call for a plane that I used to work on, and it shuts down all enemy's communications, and the Marines will hike right through, same spot, without a shot being fired because the enemy can't talk to each other and figure out who this really is. This is part of what Winfield Scott did, and he shut down the Confederates, weakening them in ways that during this time, and the Confederate trying to build just as everyone else and establish everything, he hit them where it hurt the most, stripping them of trade and money. After Winfield Scott was deemed no longer capable of physically serving his country, he was put behind the desk with a pen. It was what looked like the ending of his career, but in all honesty, he became what looks like to me to be a spy. Like I said earlier, his drive and moral ethics will never end in today's military or in society. Society may be slowly dying off with this drive because of how everything has become so free and handed out. Newer generation is losing this drive. I'm a firm believer that this drive built America. Without this great nation, this great nation will be on its downhill slope. Winfield Scott was one of the first great Americans that literally devoted his life to his country and built the backbone, drive, pride that this country has today. It's not based off of religion or race. It's based off of teamwork, devotion, pride, freedom of all. Winfield Scott, I salute you for making the biggest impact that still is made standard today.